Um, well, welcome to everyone. I am Natalie, and I've got a presentation. Obviously, I will talk you through that. But first off, I wanted just literally to show you guys at my desk. So I am both a bench jeweler and a goldsmith and a jewelry designer. And for anyone on here who is a creative in any way, shape, or form, you will probably kind of understand how artificially tidy that my bench is right now. To say I was tidying it that in the last half an hour would be an understatement. I'm not going to be one who puts some kind of artificial background behind me. This is where I sit. I am a jeweler. This is where I do a lot of my work when I'm not doing the design work. So I just wanted it to be as authentic as possible, kind of a warts and all, as it were. Um, so I'm going to get started on just talking you through both my journey and really how that aligns with if you're looking at kind of a career in the jewelry industry, if you're looking to start your own business, in whatever context you might be thinking or already doing, I want to make sure that I can kind of both use my journey as an example of some highs, but also some lows, pitfalls that some can be avoided, some can't be, and making sure that you're prepared because nothing ever is smooth sailing. So I'm going to bring up my, here we go. So this is me at the bench with slightly longer hair and a couple of less grey hairs. It was a few years ago. Um, And as I said, I am a bench jeweler. I'm a goldsmith by training, and I am the founder of Hatton Jewellery Institute based in Hong Kong. And I'm also the founder of Melville Fine Jewellery. So both of those are businesses that I started in Hong Kong, having trained in the UK, and I'll talk about my journey going to Hong Kong. It was a bit of an unexpected detour in life, but I am now based back in the UK with my team in Hong Kong, and I do commute between the two. So it's life has definitely taken some unexpected twists and turns. So, in terms of finding your vocation, I think one of the things I'm really very aware of is that I was very lucky at quite a young age to know exactly what I wanted to do. And I appreciate that is not the case for everyone. And I'll come to it, but a bit later, but I have taught thousands of students. And over that time, the number of people who've come to me mid-career, second careers, third careers, post-family careers, that it's never, if you find what you love, it doesn't matter at what point in your life you find it. If you're lucky enough to find it, embrace it. As I said, I was lucky enough at quite a young age. I did originally think I wanted to go into costume design, and was fully prepared to take that pathway and go down the road of doing a degree. And I did a lot of volunteering. I volunteered at with the Royal Opera House costume department. But by a fortuitous turn of events, I actually ended up work in a workshop. This was post high school pre-degree. I ended up in a workshop that gave me the opportunity to work with some metal, and it was a definite eureka moment. It was one of those moments where it was almost like I touched metal and went, this is what I'm meant to work with. And it was from that point on, I knew that jewelry design, metal smithing, goldsmithing was going to be my direction. And so it was what, as I said, if I put on the slide, it's what made my heart sing. And I think if you're spending time doing, sort of hours every day doing something, make sure it makes you happy. And that was really kind of the driving force behind that. Now, when I applied to my various degree programs, I applied across the board. I was incredibly lucky. I got into everything that I applied to, including Central St. Martin's. However, the Central St. Martin's interview was possibly the most harrowing. The course director at the time kind of said I was average, I'd have to work hard to keep up, but she was willing to try me and offer me a place. And I think what that really kind of set me on was my first challenges and how they really kind of foundationally changed how I approach things. So rather than taking one of the multiple unconditional offers, yes, that's me and my husband, which does play into how we kind of approached our challenges in life. Um, we and I took on, so I opted to take the Central St. Martin's p place because I felt I had something to prove. And at that point, it was really something that taking that challenge was something that then started to define how I then approached every step in my life. And I've had a lot of unexpected kind of, twists and turns. But the key to that, and this is also really plays into very much how when you're you are creating your own business, how you are adaptable, making sure you are able to be agile, whether it be for predictable things or unpredictable influences. So I graduated, started my own business. I actually apprenticed at a number of goldsmiths based in Hatton Garden in London, which is the jewellery quarter. And for those of you who know, and then when I did move to Hong Kong and started Hatton Jewellery Institute, it was in homage to where I had done my apprenticeships. Um, but I was really building up some momentum, and I was lucky enough to receive a British Fashion Council grant to go to Paris Fashion Week, and I was not in a I was not in a position of in deep pockets. It was I was raised by a single mum. We had we kind of, it was a work to make it happen situation, and so I'd kind of really kind of worked to get to the point where I could go to Paris Fashion Week. And I was like, you know what, I'm all in. I'm going to use everything I've got. I'm going to go and give it my best shot. And we got there. The show that I was exhibiting in was started on the 29th of September 2008. And for those of you who remember 2008, it was, to say it was a financially uncertain time would be an understatement. The 15th of September 2008, Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy. So what had already been a financially unstable time then turned into financial freefall. And off the back of that, I was brilliantly positioned in the show. I was right next to some really established brands, some relatively household names within the designer jewelry industry, and they were floored. They were terrified. They took zero orders for the entirety of the show. There was this just the fear factor because buyers, the few that were there, most didn't turn up, but the few that were there, none of the buyers were buying. So I returned to London, having put all my eggs in this basket, and with nothing to show for it. And my husband also at the time, being self-employed, we're only a few years out of university. We really were sitting in a position of going, what do we do? We had a broken boiler. We ended up not being able to have any heating or hot water for over a year. And the definition of, or the phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, definitely applies. I think that's it was my fiance at the time, but we obviously in the midst of all the chaos, we decided to get married, and we thought we can't sit here and wait for something to change. So we decided to hit the road. So Chris was actually brought up in the Far East, so it wasn't an unknown entity for him, but it was for me. I was a complete London girl, and I don't want to say he dragged me out of London kicking and screaming, but London was so much part of my identity. Getting to Hong Kong was a shock to the system, but it was better than sitting with a broken boiler. So in 2010, we turned up with a few suitcases and arrived in Hong Kong, which was both brilliant. And I also had a slightly, I think, naive attitude of going, well, it's a different situation. Everything's going to be fine. And it was hard work. And I really had to find myself. I had to find my identity. I had to find a home, not as in a literal home, as in a creative home. And I thought naively that arriving in Hong Kong, where there was a plentiful amount of jewelry industry, I would be able to get some bench space somewhere that was easy enough and I was used to in London. It was tumbleweed. There was nothing. The workshops I could access were sort of, I think, if there was anyone under the age of 65, it was a miracle. There were no women in it, and so this kind of at the time younger um female craftsmen. I think people looked at me like I had three heads, and what they were like, well, why don't you just send it to a factory? Why would you want to make it? Why would you get your hands dirty? There was such a kind of a pushback on it. I thought, well, I can't sit here and wait for it to happen. So it came under the umbrella of creating the job that I wanted. So, having then realized that I wasn't going to walk into a workshop, I decided to really take stock of what I wanted to do. So, the brand that I'd taken to Paris, I actually then decided to kind of really reevaluate it. And I launched Melville Fine Jewellery, which remains my fine jewellery brand. And I really wanted at that point to have some meaning. I think the turbulence of post the experience in Paris, everything with the move, I really wanted to find some value in what I was doing. And so I actually decided to then really pursue quite aggressively the focus of sustainable sourcing. And so I became the first the first brand, fine jewelry brand in Asia to be registered as a fair trade gold licensee. And I subsequently created, and I can mention it a bit later, the first fair trade gold uh, fine jewelry collection to be retailed in Asia. And it just felt like it was something that I was where there was a more plentiful supply of raw materials. It was important to then really understand where they were coming from. And that remains to this day something that is very important to me. And I then, through that, I really then was using it as a vehicle to talk and educate people in that, coupled with then obviously the craftsmanship itself. So when I was then needing to set up my own workshop, Hong Kong, as for those of you who know, it's not the cheapest place for for rent, and so I set up a little workshop and added a few extra benches. I think it would probably come under the category of sponsored by IKEA because pretty much everything was built out of IKEA, either cupboards, kitchen surfaces. It was a at Hatton Studios, as it was, which was the first iteration before Hatton Jewellery Institute was born, was in a little walk-up building. We didn't have any air conditioning, no doorbell, and you can see in the corner the dogs were my colleagues, and it was our first space, and I had a slightly Field of Dreams, for those of you who know the movie reference, of if I build it, they will come kind of situation. And I was able to, and I was very lucky to be able to do that. I was able to create this workshop with my very long-suffering husband, who, in marrying me, didn't realize he was getting into the jewelry industry quite so hands-on. Um, so there was much painting involved, and so that was how Hatton Jewellery Institute, in its first form, was born. And we were only there for 2 years because what was really interesting is in a very short space of time, suddenly these craftsmen who were kind of tucked away in kind of bedroom corners and dining tables, and whether they be kind of, it's a lot of people who were kind of doing more kind of smaller scale businesses or serious hobbyists or people who'd always wanted or had an interest in it, were coming out of the woodwork, out like just out of nowhere. And it was obviously, since then there have been more workshops have popped up. It's become experiences, and craftsmanship, and accessibility to craftsmanship has become a much more popular pastime. But at the time, we were the only ones. And so within 2 years, we massively outgrew the space. So we moved to where it is now, and remains to this day. In 2014, we moved into the now Hatton Jewellery Institute, which is our 2,000 square foot workshop in the heart of Hong Kong. At the time, completely focused on craftsmanship in person. As we all know, the pandemic changed a lot of things, and that's how a lot of our online classes were born. But actually, it allowed us to reach a far wider market, or a far wider group of people. And given the original principles of Hatton have been creativity, accessibility, and really ensuring that real connection to craftsmanship and quality education within the design arena, it was a nat it actually it was a natural step for us. But as you can see, from from this to this was quite a graduation in the space of 20 24 months. And as I said, the team over there are amazing. And actually, we now have, as of only about a week ago, for those of you who might be in Hong Kong, we have had an incredible American engraver who's relocated to Hong Kong, and he's now an engraver in residence with us and is doing engraving courses. So we're now everything we've always wanted to offer. What's next, to really give people an opportunity to think about how they can continue to grow, whether it be skills, whether it be ideas. So that everything at this point was very much workshop based. So that's how Hatton was born. So at this point, I had kind of two hats on. I was growing Hatton, growing the team, and then obviously growing my fine jewelry business. But at the same time, I was still in a city. I'd only been there for a couple of years, which in terms of a network, it was still relatively in its infancy. So my philosophy, and this is one that I say to everybody when they're starting out, is say yes. Say yes to as much as you can. Say yes to projects you would not normally think would be a, inverted commas, you, because you cannot underestimate the value of taking on projects that sit outside your natural comfort zone. So when in those early years, the projects I undertook, obviously all creative, all kind of jewelry or jewelry adjacent, continue to feed me and my experience, and really pushed me in terms of that chat those challenges. And going back to what I was saying, it's like the where kind of choosing the challenging route when I chose my degree in St. Martin's had kind of solidified my approach. This was kind of the next professional step. It's like saying yes, putting myself in uncomfortable positions, putting myself in challenging positions to further better myself. One of the things and I see this with big brands as much as smaller designers, is that where people stagnate is because they're in a comfort zone and they just don't push themselves. And you need to grow as a creative. You can't sit there in a little bubble. It doesn't work. That's not how creativity works. And so it's really interesting to kind of see what I was evolving, so both technically and creatively. And actually, as I said here, it became the foundation. So the Central St. Martin's course that I now teach, which is the Design and Collections course, I'll touch base on that a little bit later. Really kind of helped me create the foundations in this kind of say yes approach, because a lot of time people will look at projects or briefs that they are that come across their desk and go, oh, I just don't feel a connection. Now, what people don't understand is that your individuality is what people are coming to you for. That connection, you may not feel that connection, but someone has come to you for a reason. So what I said here is like you have to find pride, passion, and engagement. You can in any project, so long as you trust that someone has come to you for a reason. Sometimes you're going to know what that reason is. Sometimes you're not. That's okay. But you can still find that pride and that passion in a project. But you have to be able to understand what your creative ethos is, what your creative identity is, because that is your individuality. Because design, obviously in the context of jewelry design, is storytelling. It's about how to create your own narrative. It's your story, your journey. That's that individuality that's coming to the table. That's what you're bringing to the table. And that's what people can't copy. And I think this is what you have to really be able to kind of understand and kind of resonate with, is what is that kind of, I hate, without using buzzwords, kind of your unique selling point. But what is that uniqueness? It's your journey. I often say when I'm kind of talking to slightly larger groups, I talk to people and say, if you were to, if I was to give the same brief to the whole group, everyone on a call, I can guarantee that every single person will come up with something different. Even if I gave you exactly the same parameters, all the same, everything the same, every single person would come up with something different. And that's because your learned and your lived experience is different to everybody else. And because of that, that is that uniqueness that is you, that's what you're bringing to the table. That's what people will seek you out for. So yes, you must listen to a client. You have to, this is, it's not an ego trip, but in terms of connecting with in terms of connecting with your, sort of a showcase. You have to listen to your client, and that client may be a private bespoke client. It might be a brand. You might be working in your own company. You might be working freelance. Whatever the context, it's very important that you listen to the client. However, you have to bring your own individual creative identity to the table because that's what they've come to you for. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm over there in Hong Kong. And Hatton has started to grow, and that has been it's been an incredible experience so far at this point. But Hong Kong is somewhere that, as I've said here, there's always going to be someone with deeper pockets, wider reach, family connections of kind of diamond mines or kind of fine jewelry factories that you simply cannot compete with. So it was really, there was an element of the humbling about it, but it was really kind of being able to be at peace in myself to go, well, what is my process? What is my journey? How do I realize that in a creative identity? So, and this is, I'll touch on this a little bit more. When you are finding kind of your niche, it has to start with your passion. You can't look at an industry going, oh, I see there's a trend over here, I'm going to follow it. Trends change. If this is something you're investing your time in and your resources, if you're training, then it's really important that you are able to then connect with the passion, your own passion within it. And it's from that that I was then able to find my own creative identity in a sea of a very blingy sea, put it that way. And for me, it was the journey from the creative to the craftsmanship in its spectrum, but really in particular, it was the creative process married with my illustration, which is my area of expertise in particular, and I teach quite extensively. So in evolving this creative process, I was able to then kind of create something that was a signature that was unique to me, and I was comfortable with the fact I was not going to be the fastest, I was not going to be the cheapest, but I was 9 times out of 10 I would be the most creative. I would definitely be the most personal, and as a result, my private client base just exponentially grew. So that creative journey, that creative approach is what really started to set me apart. So my creative approach, my illustrations, and I will touch a little bit more about those, and then subsequently my craftsmanship. Now, in terms of the craftsmanship side of it, I will happily hold my hand up and say, I am a goldsmith up until you have to start setting. I am not a setter. Okay. This is where you have to understand that you can't be everything. Now, whether it be in a design context, you can't be all things to all people. And this is what I teach extensively when I'm teaching design. You have to be that when I talk about your individuality, you have to trust with your individuality that people will come to you, and those who come to you will stay loyal to you. If you try to be all things to all people, you're going to end up like magnolia wallpaper, and it's going to end up with there's that you will not build brand loyalty because you will not have an identity. It's the same with your technical skills. So when you're looking at where to really invest your time, don't try and be everything. It's that what's the phrase being a jack of all trades, a master of none. You want to have an understanding. You will be a better designer for having a broad understanding. What you do need to be aware of, though, is that you also then need a focus on a single or kind of single and adjacent part of the process. So you want that area of specialty. And that's what's going to be really crucial, because that again will elevate you in terms of that experience, that expertise. People will see you as a particular expert, and then you work with subsequent craftsmen to support the other areas. So in my case, the creative process, my illustrations, and then to a degree, the craftsmanship, depending on obviously my workload. I do a lot of my metal work myself. I do a lot of my, if I'm doing a collection, I will invariably create my collection, the base framework, but then I work with small ateliers, and I will work with a small atelier who will then actually then work on small scale production and the setting once I've made my prototypes. I've just never enjoyed setting, so it's not something I'm going to invest my time in. And because if I don't have the passion for it, I'm not going to be good enough for it. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind. So from the craftsmanship and finding my process, that was the game changer for me when we were in Hong Kong. It's in finding that sense of identity and of peace. That was in really solidifying it. That is when the floodgates opened. It was, it just snowballed, and it was an incredible time. But it was a one thing led to another. So I've just put a couple of highlights here. I was selected to become Lane Crawford's bespoke jeweler. So for those of you who may not know, Lane Crawford is, well, I was going to say they have that Harvey Nichols is in Hong Kong, but Lane Crawford is Hong Kong specific, or and they do have some stores in China, but it's their luxury high-end department store. So it's kind of your, it's not quite Harrods, it's a little bit elevated from Harvey Nichols. So it sits in that space. And unbeknownst to me, they actually had archives of over 100 years of a gemstone collection. So they invited me to create a bespoke collection for them, which then is a relationship that continues to this day. But they literally opened their safe and said, pick some. It's if it that comes under the, if you could write a brief, that's the perfect brief. That was one of those. I had no problem connecting with that brief, and so I created it was it's a collaboration, but very much with my identity and at the fore, and it was the most fantastic opportunity. And that was also the collection that I launched with the Fair Trade Gold Foundation. So it was the first Fair Trade Gold collection that was retailed Asia wide. So it was both exciting creatively, it was exciting for my career, and it was also really, for me, a very fundamental point of also of introducing something that is very important, and that real understanding of sustainability and respecting our resources effectively. I also then created Shanghai Tang's first standalone jewelry collection. They had had accessories for many years, but they had never actually had a jewelry department and a specific jewelry collection. So I created their first collection, and off the back of that, actually, I haven't made a note here. The creative director at the time then went on to launch her own fine jewelry brand, which I then creatively directed for her for a few years. So it was, again, each of these things kind of had these, in saying yes to something, you don't know what it leads to. So this is why my say yes approach is always one that I encourage. Um, Competitions, people often ask me about competitions. They're a really great way to test yourself, to push yourself, to really try new things. And off the back of that, with that in mind, I entered a competition, which I then won my category, and then went on to represent Hong Kong in that category at the time. So and it was over 2,000 entries. It's actually quite funny, as a side note, just by the nature of jewelry being a relatively small world. Some of you may have heard of Stephen Webster, who's a very well-known British jeweler. He was actually one of the judges, and he had flown over for the award ceremony, and he actually said that they were so blindsided by the volume of entries that he actually had to get his team in his work in his design team to actually assist with what his judging, because they were overwhelmed. So it was an honor and very exciting, obviously, to be to win my category. Again, from the back of that, I was then in kind of in view of the World Gold Council, and I was then selected by them to work with a Chinese-based fine jeweler. They have no exposure outside of China, but they were looking for a collaboration rather than a freelance designer. They wanted to have a particular focus, and I was invited to create a collection. It was a collection that we then honed down into a press piece, and that was quite an experience because they then flew me to the press opening, which had 1,000 people, security, and a celebrity wearing this piece that was worth about 3 million US dollars. So again, you just never know what's going to happen if you say yes. And that came about off the back of the competition entry because without that, I would not have been visible to the World Gold Council at that time. Then moving back over to Hatton, the team had continued to grow. We had a fantastic, we had, a really kind of great dynamic, and the curriculum had really started to evolve. And we were getting approached more and more now by different companies to develop training programs. And to this day, it's something I still do. And we have worked with, I've just highlighted a couple there, Chanel, Tiffany's, Sotheby's, but it was Cartier, Louis Vuitton, across the whole board. We worked with some of their retail teams, some of their creative teams, some of their communication teams. So each company had their own their own requirements, and we had an incredible, well, and still do, we've kind of created some incredible training programs, and that has given us the again an opportunity to continue to expand ourselves. Tiffany's wanted to expose their Hong Kong retail team to craftsmanship and the core values of craftsmanship, because the retail team themselves were not obviously being based in Hong Kong, we're not really kind of being exposed to the more creative aspects that the US teams have more access to. So they came to us and said, "We've got about 150 people. Can you work with us?" And as much as our workshop is the biggest private workshop in Hong Kong, it's 30 benches, of which half is education, half is co-working space. It's still a challenge. So over the course of a month, and obviously working with retail rosters, we were then rotating this 150 person group through the workshop to give them, again, you're not going to turn people into jewelers in a couple of classes, but to really give them that exposure to the value of craftsmanship and what it is, and what they were able to gain from it, and create that excitement, seeing beyond just the asset value. And then just to give you a little visual, so the collection with Lane Crawford, here are a couple of the pieces that I was able to create. And again, these are pieces where I made the base work, I made the gold work, and then I worked with my diamond setter to be able to then to set them. And the collaborative project with the company in China. So just a little example of some of the illustrations, the sketches, and then the final piece. And this one actually I didn't include it in the slides. But me making it had not been part of the brief by any stretch. So we actually ended up, so I was meant to be just doing illustrations, technical drawings, which again, very much my area of kind of expertise. And the factory, working with their atelier in China, and just they couldn't get it. There was something about it. It just wasn't right. So I had a bit of a diva moment, went, I'll do it. And so I was able to, and because I have the bench skills, I was able to create so each of these petals, each of these sections here are actually articulated petals. So actually when you lift it up, it actually sits. So no matter who's wearing it, always sits comfortably on the body. And so I actually made two sets of them, so to show both how each of those petals linked, and then how each of those sections then linked to each other. And I carved them in wax, cast them, polished them, and then dispatched them. And they then made molds of them. So all of the carving, the wax carving, everything was I did myself. I was like, I'm at that point, I was like, I'm not going to charge you. I just need it to be right. If this is going to have my name on it. So I again, because I had the skill set, I had the flexibility, freedom, and control to then be able to create the actual the piece as it was designed, rather than be beholden to obviously a workshop that just wasn't getting the connection. It's not that they weren't great. You can see their setting was fantastic, and over time, workshop relationships do evolve. And this is something to bear in mind if you are working with a workshop that you intend to work with over a period of time. Communication takes a little bit, so or allow time for it to settle. It's like a pair of shoes. If the fit's not right, you will know. But at the same time, if you're wanting to work with a workshop for a period of time, then there's going to be just a settling in period of how you communicate. So that is something I would just say as a kind of not a cautionary tale, but just something to kind of to be aware of. So, most importantly, when you're looking at kind of, or as I've kind of tried to weave in both the advice with my journey, um, is focus on your passion, but don't lose sight of the bigger picture. So see the bigger picture, know your whole business, but have your area that is your area of expertise that people will gravitate towards you for. So when I doing illustration workshops with Sotheby's VIP clients, that I'm not there trying to make a piece of jewelry for them. That's not what they came to me for. They came to me because they wanted that the quality of illustration and that tactile, more kind of quieter type of workshop and experience. So again, if you have these areas that you can then really elevate your profile around, that can again open doors that you may not even anticipate. So it's important to be able to have that, but at the same time, you do not want to lose sight of the bigger picture. So you can see here in terms, as I said, I mentioned earlier, creativity does not exist in a bubble. It's really important that you're able to see that bigger picture. So one thing I have been working with other with some of the designers that I've been in the classes I've been working on is that the symbiosis, the relationship between basically civilization and evolution, is mirrored in design. I'm not talking just about jewelry design. You can be talking about architecture, you can be talking about fashion. Design is a mirror to whether it be the economic, the societal changes, whatever it might be, it is that mirror. So understanding that bigger picture, being connected with a bigger picture is very important as a designer. And that includes your business, how you run your business, how you structure your business, how you're connected with all aspects of your business, which comes back to surrounding yourself with people who uplift you, whether that be kind of supportive family if it's a small business, really kind of core teammates if it's within the structure of a business that's growing and you're scaling it. But again, make sure that you don't want to be overly controlling, but you do want to be connected with all aspects of your business. So what's next? What if you're looking at a career in jewelry design, what do you do? How do you kind of take those steps? The steps I've taken, as I said, plenty of them were not expected, but they gave me the pathway to where I am now. Just as I would be, looking at how I would connect with, my own education. I've often been asked if I were to replay my education now, would I do the same thing? And I absolutely loved the training that I did. It was of a time. If I were in that position now, I probably would not repeat a degree because education has evolved to have more nuanced areas that you can curate your own journey. So there are going to be some careers where an educational pathway really is beholden to being a degree. Others, and I would say this is one of them, if it's a pathway that you want to take, absolutely. I'm not saying don't do it, but I would also say if I were to repeat it now, I wouldn't go down a degree route. I would do a more curated, kind of more bespoke creation of my education journey. So also, just reiterating, what within the industry, where do you start? the jewelry industry is vast. And again, depending on where you are in the world, there are going to be different areas and different opportunities. Some areas are more craftsmanship heavy, some areas are going to be more creatively heavy, some areas are going to be very receptive and more kind of independent designers. Other areas are not. That's something I would say with in Hong Kong, the independent designer market is really it's in its infancy still, and the actual consumer in Hong Kong is far less receptive than obviously I said because I'm based between the UK and Hong Kong, far less receptive to independent designers. In a lot of the time, and I would say as a caveat, the fine jewelry in market in Hong Kong is effectively 18 karat gold. That's it. There's no 9 carat, 14 carat doesn't exist. Europe, North America, it's very kind of well understood, very kind of much part of the kind of consumer market. If a designer, an independent designer is starting out, a lot of the time they can't launch straight out of the gate with the highest value materials. So it does put designers, and I'm just obviously using Hong Kong as a particular example, but it fits depending on areas around the world, where you have to be mindful of is that if you're based there, does that mean your primary market is going to be there, or would actually you be looking to go further afield? So a lot of the designers I know are based out of Hatton Jewellery Institute in our co-working community. They are based there, but their primary market actually is not specifically in Hong Kong. So they use it as a base, but not as their primary consumer market. And then you don't need to learn everything all at once. When I said, you can really curate a much greater kind of idea of your different avenues, that's what you can do. And this point, you can figure out your passion, follow that, allow it to evolve. I say that with a cautionary tale, don't kind of pinball. So bit here, bit here, bit here. You don't want to, again, that comes under jack of all trades, master of none. You do want to really have a focus that you invest a particular amount of time in. One engraver that I was talking to said, unless you spent 10,000 hours practicing, you're not an engraver. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say, unless you spend 10,000 hours practicing illustration, you're not going to be a gouache illustrator. But there does need to be an investment of time. So that's why you really have to love it. So, and then it also comes back to, are you launching your own collections? Are you launching your own brand? Are you wanting to work freelance? Are you wanting to work for someone else? There are so many different hats that you can wear that there is no one size fits all. So if you start with your passion and start with what makes your heart sing, what I said at the beginning, from there, you can then really kind of take and kind of snowball out what your potential opportunities are, because sometimes opportunities are there that you don't know about until you've developed the skill set. So areas of study. So I touched a little bit. Obviously, I myself did a degree, which at Central St. Martin's was absolutely brilliant, and really excitingly, I now am back teaching with them. So I kind of feel it's very much a full circle. So in that sense, I really have been really kind of lucky to be able to engage back in with my own alma mater. But what other options are there? So obviously design and creative process. I've touched on those, and visual language, technical drawing and gouache illustration. Those are my kind of two key areas. So what I teach are the first two on here. And I can tell you a bit more about the courses if anyone is interested shortly. Higher education, there are quite a wide range. Now for higher education, these are ones that I would really only recommend in person, depending on where you are in the world. Just the sheer kind of cost of investment, if you're looking at a multi-year degree, that is something I would say would need to be an in-person. So that is kind of puts a certain amount of geographical limitation. Then comes kind of three much more specific categories. Gemology, so the key ones would be the GEMA and GIA. And brilliant. I will do that on I'll come back on the visual language shortly. The gemology and comes under the GIA, which is the American system. GEMA is the British system. Now, I could say about half of the jewelers in Hatton in our co-working community are gemologists, so GIA certified. I would say half of those never use it. So really make sure that you know what you are wanting to invest your time in. Sorry, my we small power outage. The light's going to come back on. If I've suddenly gone a little bit paler, um, it is something that you have to really think about what you are wanting to uh, enter in terms of your area of passion. I say that because so many of the gemologists that I know within the workshop kind of took it a little bit more as a, oh, I should have this diploma. And it was more of a should rather than a passion decision. And as a result, they spent time, resources on doing their diploma and subsequently never use it. So I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, and there is absolutely a time and a place for and a need for it, depending on where you want to sit within the industry. Comes back to start with your passion. And if you can find that passion and grow your skill set from there, that becomes your area of expertise. Everything else becomes your foundation. So I have another design student who is looking at and she's in the midst of her gemology diploma. She very particularly actually wants to work with she actually funny enough, she actually wants to work with both develop her own collection and develop her own brand whilst also working for a gem dealer. So she has a really she has a strong desire to develop her own brand, but wants to be able to um, she wants to be able to really have that strong knowledge and experience, industry experience with it as a gemologist as well, or working for a gem dealer. So she has a very, she's coupled both her passion and her practical, and it's with an agenda. So I would just say something like a gemology diploma. Think about why you're doing it. Are you doing it because you think you should? If you are, just take a step back and go, what other areas would you want to really invest in terms of both your time and your money? Now, CAD and apprenticeships. Now, these kind of are kind of two sides of the same coin, I would say. Obviously, CAD courses are quite widely accessible. We don't teach them. We have done in the past, but the teacher is not currently available. But I would say it's also something that because we are very much focused on traditional skills, it kind of we've taken a step back to just really focus on the traditional skills. And from the CAD side of it, it is something that you have to think about it. I align it with gem setting. So gem setting, you don't think you're going to go and become a gem setter overnight. Well, if you do, I can promise you it takes a little longer. Um, it's a bit like that. It's one of those skills that it takes a lot longer than you think to be able to be good enough to be professional about it. If you love working on a computer, if you love the technological side of it, if you love that kind of combination and exploration of 3D printing, absolutely CAD is your route in. Go for it. And I know plenty of people who do. And it's a real, there's actually one of the designers, actually, I'd say one of the co-working community, and he's all about CAD because he's got an engineering background. He creates pieces that have a real kind of almost an engineered quality. It's absolutely his strength. But think about it, it's not a shortcut. It's not something that, oh, if I could do this, I could do it quickly. The reason I work with a gem setter is because I don't have the time or the passion to invest into becoming a good enough gem setter. Same with a CAD designer. I don't have the time and the finances to invest in my time frame to be able to be good enough to make it worthwhile in terms of for it to supersede other areas that people come to me for. And in that sense, as a result, I work with a fantastic CAD designer when I need, and actually he's a great teacher. So if anyone does want to go down the CAD route, I am happy. I will have no affiliation. He's a brilliant teacher, happily share his information. But it's a specialism and you have to love it. So apprenticeships, these are uh, these are a little bit more challenging in terms of there are just less of them. There are simply less apprenticeships available. That said, the ones that are available are more very competitive to get it into, but they are brilliant when you're on. Nowadays, and not to be ageist about it, they are quite focused on kind of getting younger people into the industry. So they do seem to be kind of as in place of a higher education. So it's people who are coming out of schools. It's kind of that demographic that most of the apprenticeships are targeted for towards. That said, you can still it more on a kind of a personal relationship basis. You can find apprenticeships with jewelers who might be prepared to share or want to share their information, particularly those who might be coming towards the end of their career and want to share. But again, that is very much on a case by case basis. But apprenticeships are a fantastic alternative to higher education if you have the particular area of passion in bench work, in that master craftsman kind of avenue and path into the industry. So you can see how there are really kind of different areas. For me, the design and the visual language are my key areas of passion and therefore expertise. Yes, I'm a bench jeweler and it's a very valuable part of my repertoire. And as going back to the collaboration with the brand in China, I really that stood me in very good stead. And I do also teach some of our online. So I actually teach online wax for some of our courses. But we are going to be it is something that I have as a supporting part of my repertoire. It's not a core component. So just really kind of I know I sound like a broken record, but just think about where those kind of key areas that you would want to spend that time in. So how can I help? So as I said, creative process and visual language are my two areas. So for my creative process, we have two courses that we run with that's Central St. Martin's courses. One is a 1 year program it's one academic year. It starts in October. It is a an online program, but I am one of the teachers. There are two teachers on the program. I'm one of them. I teach the visual language. The other teacher teaches the creative process. So, and it's very much focused on your personal creative development, your personal creative identity. The 3 month program that is my curriculum that I'm next teaching in February, that one is very much focused on designing to a brief. It's more industry facing or kind of professional facing in terms of how do you work to a brief? Is it if it's a brief that you would write, if it's a brief that you wouldn't write. So that's what I have coming up. So you could see on this one, that's the quick overview on that. So month 1, 2, 3. Month 1 focuses on designing for a jewelry brand if you're working either for collaborating with or freelancing within the team for an existing jewelry brand. Month 2 is looking at brands that are not jewelry brands. So they have a creative DNA, but they don't have a footprint for jewelry. So looking when I spoke about Shanghai Tang, Shanghai Tang it's a fashion brand. It had accessories. It didn't have a full jewelry line. So when I first did that collection, it was very much looking at it was that would come under the designing for a non-jewelry brand. You can obviously that's you can look at other brilliant examples. I would say Zaha Hadid and Bulgari. I mean, a wonderful marriage of a jewelry brand and a non-jeweler, but a complete creative visionary. And you could see how in their pieces, in the pieces she created for Bulgari, how that her identity is so clear, but they're still very much Bulgari pieces. It's just I think that's a brilliant example of how you can create a successful marriage between a creative visionary and a non-jewelry identity or a non-jewelry designer. And then month 3 is looking at a theme versus a collection. So for this round in February, last time we were looking at Tiffany Blue Books. For the next round, we're actually going to be looking at the Met Gala. So it's how do you take a theme? How do you design to a brief, but the brief is a theme rather than a more set parameters of a collection? We will also be touching on designing engagement rings. So that will be a smaller part of it. But again, it's more that bespoke, more curated brief rather than the broader parameters of a collection brief, which is month 1 and 2. So although it fits under the collection umbrella, it's more thematic than it is kind of prescriptive. So that's the Central St. Martin's 3 month. And then obviously I have my technical drawing and gouache illustration programs. So these are my visual language. So how you develop your visual language. Technical drawing is actually technical and perspective drawing, and that is something we're looking at the from the perspective of your total visual language. So from your initial sketches, your speed sketches, your ideas, right through to your technical drawing in the creating the roadmap and the actual blueprint of a finished piece. How you can cost it, how you can manage it, how you can draw it to scale. Very important. And then the gouache illustration is traditional gouache, which is a water-based medium, not watercolor, but it's water based. And the gouache illustration is a fantastic and hugely popular within the jewelry industry medium of realizing and bringing your ideas to life. And actually, and I talk about it a little bit in the course. It's brilliant. It's historical. And you look at the Cartier, the Van Cleef archives; they are full. It's all gouache illustrations. And so if you're working then within the fine jewelry arena and you're wanting to work for pre-existing brands, so as in you're not creating your own lines. Gouache is actually quite the rendering. Gouache rendering is seen as often asked for as one of the kind of the standard skills. So it is something that within the high jewelry, fine jewelry arena, particularly European brands, is still very much part of the skill set that is required. So. It's not just an artistic skill that's enjoyable, it's an artistic skill that still has high demand within a particular field in the industry. So just to give you a quick overview on where that sits in terms of the programs, I've got two CSM programs coming up, one in February, and then we've got the same course again running in March. They're 12 weeks, one class per week, and then we have two streams running for the gouache illustration, and then we have one technical and perspective drawing starting in February, and we can do any combination of different ones. So we've got a couple of people just doing one, couple of people doing combination of all of the above. So of the streams, not obviously. So in terms of my pathway, I hope that my own journey has been of value. I'm going to just stop sharing so we can see me. Now, at this point, you're probably seeing that there aren't any other participants. That is because about 15 minutes ago, I had a power outage. So when it came back on, we were on the recording did not resume. So I am recapping what was discussed, and so that when this goes out, obviously, people who were unable to join us, or for those who want to just recap some of the information, we haven't missed out. We don't lose it at the point of the power outage. I think, yeah, unfortunately, it happens once every couple of months, but. As is always the way, it happens when you least want it to happen. So we did have a couple of questions that were asked. So I'm just going to pull those up. So in terms of the different types of gemology programs, yes, obviously there are others apart from the GIA and GEMA. Those are just the ones that I'm kind of most familiar with. So obviously a lot of it's location specific because gemology diplomas do come with the requirements of obviously needing laboratory time. So depending on where you're based, it depends on obviously what laboratories are available to you. Okay, and then looking at this, I've just got a few more. I'm picking out a couple of the key questions that were asked. So someone was asking about precious metal clay and how it kind of combines into kind of the total fabrication. It's another skill, another material. So all that means is you want to make sure that when you are designing, you're creating your plan of how you're going to make something. If you are in the designer maker category, how you then are able to bring that to life, how you're going, what skill set, what materials. It's not that one skill set in one particular material is going to be appropriate for the whole piece. The wider your repertoire and knowledge of skills, the more you can see what areas will be best suited. So there are pieces I've made where I've had a small component that's been CAD created because it's particularly technical. I've had another area that where I've wax carved it, and then you can kind of see how you can kind of build depending on obviously the end piece and obviously your skill set. So it's just another part of a repertoire rather than necessarily being a standalone. That said, it can be a standalone for someone who may not have necessarily the experience or the equipment to have a full workshop setup. So it's also something that's nice. I find like accessible. I love encouraging accessibility. So it's great in terms of enabling people who might not have, again, as I said, the skills or the full workshop to be able to still be able to create. So I'm all for that. Um, Another question, why not to take a degree? I will not kind of extend as much as the answer as much as I did because it kind of went off and I get quite enthused about certain areas, and ultimately I think nowadays the cost versus the resources versus the accessibility to your to the equipment, it's just much harder. So because I was at university 20 years ago. So it just comes down to just simply, God, more than 20 years ago. That's depressing. All it does is it comes down to what the investment is. And I think also the time that I was at university, the kind of courses that were available, this more kind of curated, the ability to trying to curate your own package, as it were, wasn't available. Whereas nowadays there's such a more kind of such a wider array. You can curate a much more specific and tailored to you program of education, and that is, I think, why if I were to repeat my education now, I would go down that route rather than my a degree route. That said, and in part why I opted to go for St. Martin's, because it did set me the challenge of really having to level up, have to step up to the plate, was very important. But also, it is because of its name recognition. It did open doors, and I can't, there's no way I can kind of ignore that. So it did have value in that sense, as well as having the friends I made, the connections I made. They remain very active in the jewelry industry. They remain some very prominent names in the jewelry industry. So again, I can't deny that. So it's a personal choice. If resources aren't an issue, then it can be great. But I would also say, because the classes are larger, etc., I would also then say it would still need supplementation with some additional education outside of the university setup, just because you don't have the same level of access to some of the tutors and the experience. So that would just be my takeaway. Someone was asking about payment plans. Yes, we do. You can drop me an email. I have put it in the chat, but I'll say it. So it's Nathalie with an H, Nathalie at HJI Asia, so Hatton Jewellery Institute, HJIAsia.com. So you can drop me an email, and depending on the course, we've got different options. The Central St. Martin's, we've just got a little less flexibility, obviously, because we work with the university. But as much as we can, we will try and accommodate. So if anyone does have questions about payment plans, you can email me. And there was one question that I did because I've skimmed a few of them, I missed, that was about enamel. Is this important? I love enamel. Yes, it is. It's wonderful. It introduces color without introducing cost to the same level as gemstones. It's got hugely historical context, but at the same time, it also has amazing. It has really kind of contemporary reimaginings. So I think it's absolutely wonderful. And the risk of sounding really getting a bit too enthused, I have my microscope here. I have a I'm studying, I'm learning engraving because I actually did my degree using enamel, but I'm wanting to go back to I have started to learn engraving, but I'm completely in my infancy, so it goes to show there are continued areas that you can learn, no matter how far in your career you are. And so actually I'm learning engraving, and because I want to be able to then go back to connect with my enameling passion, which is just, and you can look at some of the contemporary jewelers nowadays. They are extraordinary, and they use it in such varied ways. You've got Nikos Koulis, who is an incredible Greek designer who marries black. He only works in black enamel, and he marries it with incredible like inked statement diamonds. And then you've got someone like CC Jewellery, whose meteoric rise has just she uses enamel like paint, and she works with the traditional craftsmen. And even though she's her brand has exploded in a matter of a few years, she still works very traditionally with them, but she uses them in beautiful, whimsical, very storytelling ways, which totally speaks to me as a from a narrative perspective. But again, it's a contemporary reimagining of a skill that's, I think I would have to check, but I think enamel is probably kind of trace it back a millennia, so it's got real history. So yes, 100%. Ultimately, all skills are important. It depends on what you want to be able to showcase, what you want to bring to life. And the last thing I'm going to finish on is, on that note, you want to design, as a designer, you want to design to the best of your ability, not to the best of the assets. So tying in the whether it be the techniques, whether it be the materials, and the designer I think best did this was René Lalique. So turn of the early 1900s. He was the godfather of or the grandfather of enamel actually. But his pieces were just spectacular. They were he used material just like a canvas. He painted with enamel, with wood, with he didn't worry about what the asset value was. And I think that's what I would really say is the biggest takeaway. Design with your creativity at heart. Don't design with the kind of the asset value at heart. And I partly because I've been seen a lot of that, but I think that is probably one of the most important things. So, and that's why having such a, a knowledge, even if you don't learn them all, but if you have a knowledge of what is out there, what techniques are out there, what materials are available, that's just it opens doors. And actually I'd say one of the more contemporary collections that really highlight that is the Van Cleef Noah's Ark, or I'm going to mispronounce it terribly, the L'Arche de Noé. It was a few years ago now, maybe about 10 years ago. And it was Noah's Ark, and they were all created in pairs, and they just pins, like little lapel pins, and brooches, and they were just it's just a riot of imagination. To me, I think it's just genius design. Each one has its own identity, it has its own materials, and it's just pure joy. Even if it's not to your taste, you can really see they use every material under the sun. And I feel like that has probably come as close as I would say that Lalique did, in terms of really using all materials that are best suited to a design, than it is to kind of start with an idea that you want it to be a certain value. So with that, thank you for those who were able to join. And obviously we kind of lost the tail end of, but I've made up the remainder of it here. And for those of you who are not able to join, please feel free, if you want to either get in touch with me via email. You can, if you want to set up a call. I'm happy to do one-to-one calls, just to kind of, if people have questions, whether it be about courses, pathways, anything you like. I'm happy to do that. So with that, thank you all for being a part of my first webinar. So hopefully I'll have a chance to do more. Maybe I'll get a chance to kind of to discuss progression of when you are starting a new skill 20 years into your career. How does it go? So I am both an educator, and I've now gone back to being a student. So I'll report back on that. But anyway, thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.